In this exercise, we're going to use the book written by Ayn Rand, which is called Anthem. Pretty easy to read book, easier than Fountainhead or Atlas Shrugged, her other two books, which, if you're interested, you may find enlightening to pursue yourself. The purpose of this exercise is to understand what Ayn Rand is exemplifying in her storytelling methodology. Now, Ayn Rand is the theorist that authored the theory of objectivism. The theory of objectivism is said to be the underlying premise which the economic system of capitalism was built upon. But let's not get distracted by that point. This is not a course in macro or microeconomics, and this is not a course in political science. So we aren't going to endeavor deeply into how the theory of objectivism, as written by Ayn Rand, was used to author an economic system called capitalism, and whether or not we are practicing capitalism or anyone is economically would be a question outside of the scope of a psychology course. Interesting to ponder, but again, off topic for our purpose. What is our purpose in studying the theory of objectivism as depicted by Ayn Rand's book, Anthem? Let's start with Ayn Rand was born in Russia, 1905. She left Russia for America in 1926 at the age of 21, and she wrote the book Anthem in 1937 while she was conducting research that is the basis for her theory of objectivism, and the book Fountainhead, her next authorship after Anthem. Ayn Rand became, and always was, very controversial because the theory of objectivism seems to make a judgment about the constructs of socialism, fascism, communism, comparatively to the ideals in Ann's authorship, and hence became a subject for political fodder when she wrote it, and still is. Our purpose today is to look at the theory of objectivism and the book itself from the perspective of psychology of the individual. So, we do not want to be distracted by the political and economic uses of the theory of objectivism, because deductive reasoning is charging us with staying on topic. And as we walk through this presentation, we're going to talk about how does the theory of objectivism, which is based upon Jean-Paul Sartre's theory of existentialism and his book Being and Nothingness, how does that relate to the psychology of the individual? So, Anthem, as you read the story, you will realize it is a story, just like Fountainhead, just like Ayn Rand's other authorships. Her narrative style is storytelling. She's exemplifying a construct through telling a whole story about maybe being based upon her life growing up in Russia, and the notion of the individual versus how does groupthink existentially negate the value of the individual in society. So the theme is a duality between collectivism and individualism. And Ayn Rand uses deductive reasoning, which she calls objectivism, in order to understand how does collectivism affect the individual and work to and against the individual's identity. Now, it does appear in reading the book that Ayn Rand has a bias against collectivism. That bias seems to be political and economic. But for our purposes today, we're going to stay focused on the value of identity and the constructs of the individual, autonomy and agency of the individual are the key core constructs that we are going to bring from the theory of objectivism and these stories into psychology. And this is the core of Jean-Paul Sartre's theory of existentialism, which is on the Maslow pyramid, what we call actualization, the highest level of existentially authenticating oneself as an individual with value. The theory of existentialism is described by Maslow as actualization when we talked about the Maslow pyramid before in our lessons. So, autonomy and agency. Autonomy means that the person is individual. Agency means that the person has value. And between value and independence, a person has a right to their feelings and to their private thoughts. Sometimes a person must consider the needs of themselves and others, but their feelings, private thoughts, and deductive reasoning come together using a unique human capacity which is derived from frontal lobe and prefrontal cortex processing in order to evolve significantly beyond our fixed thinking, which is passed down intergenerationally and cemented in place in childhood. So what is free autonomous will? It's when the individual can make choices, decisions, and direct their own lives by the ideas and values they adopt in experiencing and understanding those experiences. Objectification comes from others and society feeling as the aims of the other is more important than the individual. So objectification is a serious defect when it comes to relationships. And when we talk about relationships, we're not just talking about one-to-one, intimate, interpersonal relationships. We're talking about the individual's relationships with any social framework. Could be intimate, could be one-to-one, could be with groups, could be with social constructs, government, school, work, religion. So through using autonomous free will, making our own choices, our own decisions, directing our own lives based upon making what we may view as progress and mistakes, through experiencing ideas and creating value from those ideas, we avoid objectification. The value and identity of the person is their right to their private feelings and their private thoughts. Without that value and identity, the person becomes an object for the will of others, and the needs of the individual are lost by that objectification. So again, we are going to conduct a deductive reasoning exercise. All of us are going to read the book Anthem. Just to reinforce what I already said, this is not a political science assignment. It is psychological. Don't get distracted by current affairs, governments, economics, fascism, communism, socialism, and capitalism. Out of scope. Deductive reasoning means that our assignment is to look at the autonomy, the agency, and the purpose in the human condition that is described through the book Anthem. And then apply those definitions deductively to the human condition in a narrative essay. So what are our discussion questions? First, we must define the value of autonomy, agency, and purpose in the human condition using empirical sources. So your first assignment is to look at autonomy, agency, and purpose, those three words. Use the school library, source your references in defining how those three words apply to the human condition. The next part of your exercise is to discuss objectification as evidenced by John Paul Sartre's philosophy of objectification. You can click on this link within the slides, which are published in Canvas, and use that as one of your sources, or any other empirical source that you can find in the library, which is peer-reviewed. Then answer these research questions. Do you believe that you need to consider your own needs before others? And describe an instance in your own life where you had to put yourself first before family and friends, despite the pressure that you may have felt from society. This is back to Freud. The importance of the id over the superego, putting pressure to conform from society, and then the output, which is the ego, a modification of the id to existentially express one's identity, considering society and balancing ourselves against social pressure.